Imagine a world where the laughter of children is replaced by screams, where innocence is shattered by unimaginable cruelty, where the very people meant to protect become the perpetrators of pain. This is not a horror movie. This is not a figment of someone's imagination. This is the real-life nightmare of Rica Rountree, an 8-year-old girl whose life was brutally stolen. Rica Rountree was a bright, loving child who deserved a life filled with joy and laughter. But her life was tragically cut short, a victim of unspeakable abuse at the hands of those who should have cherished and protected her. On this day, in a seemingly ordinary town, a 911 call revealed a house of horrors. A house where innocence was lost, where trust was betrayed, and where a young life was extinguished. This is the story of a child failed by everyone, a story of abuse, neglect, and a system that turned a blind eye. This is the story of Rica Rountree, a story that will haunt you long after the credits roll. Rica Rountree was more than just a victim. She was a real person, a little girl with a big personality. Those who knew her described her as bright, curious, and full of life. She loved to sing and dance, and her favorite color was purple. She dreamed of becoming a veterinarian one day, caring for animals just like she cared for her beloved pet hamster, Mr. Nibbles. Rica was a star student at North Point Elementary School in Bloomington. Her teachers remember her as a quick learner with a thirst for knowledge. She excelled in reading and loved to write stories. She was a kind and compassionate friend, always ready with a smile and a helping hand. But Rica's happy childhood wouldn't last. Dark clouds were gathering on the horizon, threatening to engulf her world in a storm of abuse and neglect. A bitter custody battle raged between Rica's parents, Anntionetta and Richard Rountree. The court proceedings were filled with accusations and counter-accusations, painting a picture of a family in turmoil. Anntionetta fought tooth and nail to protect her children, but the system seemed stacked against her. Despite her concerns about Richard's stability and his new partner, Cynthia Baker, the court ultimately granted him custody of Rica and her brother. This decision would have devastating consequences for Rica. She was sent to live with her father and a woman she barely knew, a woman who would soon become her tormentor. What went wrong in the custody proceedings? Why were Antionetta's concerns ignored? And what kind of environment was Rica sent to live in? Stay with us as we delve deeper into the events that led to Rica's tragic fate. The custody battle between Anntionetta and Richard Rountree was a protracted and bitter affair, spanning several years and riddled with accusations and conflicting accounts. Court records paint a picture of a relationship marked by instability and allegations of domestic violence. Anntionetta repeatedly voiced concerns about Richard's ability to provide a safe and stable environment for the children. She alleged that he had a history of anger management issues and had been physically abusive towards her in the past. Court documents show a pattern of police reports filed by Anntionetta detailing instances of Richard's aggression and threats. She also expressed reservations about Cynthia Baker, Richard's new girlfriend, whom she described as controlling and volatile. Anntionetta claimed that Cynthia had a history of manipulating Richard and isolating him from his family and friends. Despite these warning signs, the court ultimately ruled in favor of Richard Rountree. He was granted full custody of Rica and her brother, leaving Anntionetta devastated and deeply worried about her children's well-being. The court's decision was based on Antionetta's criminal record and perceived instability, despite the documented history of Richard's own problematic behavior. Looking back, it's clear that there were red flags all along. But were these warning signs adequately investigated? Did the court fully consider the potential risks to Rica and her brother? And why were Antionetta's concerns dismissed? Was it simply because she was a convicted felon, or were there other factors at play? Rica was sent to live in a home with a man struggling with his own demons and a woman who harbored a dark secret. A woman who, according to Anntionetta and other sources, had a history of abusive behavior herself. A woman who would soon unleash her cruelty on an innocent child. Rica's case is sadly not unique. Every year, countless children suffer abuse and neglect at the hands of their caregivers. What was it like for Rica to live in this house? What kind of abuse did she endure? And why did no one intervene sooner? Stay with us as we uncover the horrifying truth behind Rica Rountree's tragic death and examine the systemic failures that allowed it to happen. Rica's life with her father and his girlfriend, Cynthia Baker, quickly descended into a living nightmare. The once vibrant and cheerful little girl became withdrawn and fearful. Her infectious laughter, once a constant melody in the Rountree household, was replaced by whimpers and cries. Behind the closed doors of the East Willow Street home, a horrifying pattern of abuse began to unfold, hidden from the eyes of the outside world. The abuse Rica endured was multifaceted, leaving scars both visible and invisible. While the physical scars would later be meticulously documented in her autopsy report, it was the emotional and psychological trauma that truly eroded her spirit and sense of self. Cynthia Baker, the woman entrusted with her care, became her tormentor, subjecting her to a relentless campaign of cruelty. Rica was forced to endure punishments that were both cruel and unusual. She was deprived of food, leaving her with a constant gnawing hunger. Sleep became a luxury she was rarely afforded, as she was often forced to stay awake through the night. Cynthia Baker devised sadistic punishments, making Rica stand for hours in uncomfortable positions, her small body aching with fatigue. The verbal abuse was relentless, a constant barrage of insults and degradation aimed at breaking her spirit. Cynthia Baker's cruelty seemed to know no bounds. She would force Rica to perform strenuous chores far beyond her capabilities, her tiny hands struggling with tasks meant for adults. She would lock Rica in dark closets, leaving her alone with her fear and despair. And through it all, she maintained a chilling detachment, her actions fueled by a twisted sense of control and domination. Rica Rountree, Rica's father, was not merely a passive bystander. He actively participated in the abuse, either directly inflicting pain or condoning Cynthia Baker's actions. He seemed to have abdicated his role as a protector, choosing instead to appease his girlfriend and perpetuate the cycle of violence. Whether out of fear, weakness, or a twisted sense of loyalty, he failed his daughter in the most profound way imaginable. The abuse escalated over time, becoming more frequent and more severe. Rica's once bright eyes grew dull with despair, her spirit slowly crushed under the weight of her tormentor's cruelty. She became a shadow of her former self, her laughter and joy extinguished by the darkness that surrounded her. But in the midst of this nightmare, there were glimmers of hope. Rica found solace in small acts of kindness, in the whispered words of a concerned teacher, in the comforting presence of her brother. She clung to these moments of light, desperate to believe that one day she would be free. Would those glimmers of hope be enough to save Rica from the darkness that enveloped her? Would anyone see the signs and intervene before it was too late? Stay with us as we delve deeper into the nightmare that was Rica Rountree's life and uncover the tragic events that led to her untimely death. I know this was a heavy one, but these stories need to be told. If you're feeling it, give this video a thumbs up and share it to spread awareness. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and join our true crime community. For those of you who've been here a while, you know I appreciate you. Thanks for sticking around. The full extent of Rica's suffering was laid bare in the autopsy report, a chilling document that detailed the horrific abuse she endured in the final months of her life. The report, conducted by forensic pathologists, revealed a litany of injuries, both old and new, that painted a grim picture of systematic abuse. Rica's small body bore the marks of countless beatings. There were bruises of varying ages, indicating a pattern of repeated physical assault. Scars crisscrossed her skin, evidence of past wounds that had never been properly treated. Internal injuries revealed damage to vital organs, a testament to the brutal force inflicted upon her. The autopsy also revealed signs of malnutrition. Rica's body was severely underweight, her bones protruding beneath her thin skin. Her stomach was empty, suggesting that she had been deprived of food for an extended period. The report concluded that Rica's death was the result of multiple blunt force injuries and complications of child abuse. But the most disturbing evidence came not from the sterile confines of the autopsy room, but from Cynthia Baker's own cell phone. In a series of videos, Baker documented her own cruelty, capturing the abuse she inflicted upon Rica in chilling detail. The videos, played in court, shocked the jury and the nation. They showed Rica being forced to stand for hours, naked and shivering, holding cans of food as punishment. They captured her cries of pain as Baker struck her with a belt, her small body flinching with each blow. They revealed the depths of Baker's depravity, her sadistic pleasure in Rica's suffering. One video, particularly disturbing, showed Rica being forced to eat her own vomit. Another captured Baker taunting Rica, threatening her with further violence if she didn't comply with her demands. The videos provided undeniable proof of the horrors that Rica endured, a stark contrast to the facade of normalcy that Baker presented to the outside world. The videos also implicated Rica Rountree in the abuse. In one clip, Rountree can be heard encouraging Baker to punish Rica, his voice cold and devoid of empathy. In another, he is seen passively watching as Baker berates and humiliates Rica, his silence speaking volumes about his complicity. The evidence against Baker and Rountree was overwhelming, a damning indictment of their cruelty and neglect. But how did this abuse go undetected for so long? Why didn't anyone intervene sooner? And what were the systemic failures that allowed this tragedy to occur? Stay with us as we continue to explore the case of Rica Rountree and seek answers to these crucial questions. The trial of Cynthia Baker began on November 18, 2019, at the McLean County Law and Justice Center in Bloomington, Illinois. The courtroom was filled with a palpable tension as the prosecution and defense prepared to present their cases. Baker, dressed in a somber suit, sat impassively at the defendant's table, her face betraying no emotion. The prosecution, led by Assistant State's Attorney, meticulously laid out the evidence against Baker. They presented the harrowing autopsy report, detailing the extent of Rica's injuries. They showed the jury the disturbing videos Baker had recorded on her cell phone, forcing them to confront the brutal reality of the abuse. They called witnesses who testified to Baker's volatile temper and her controlling behavior towards Rica. One witness, a neighbor, testified to hearing frequent shouting and crying coming from the Rountree house. She recounted seeing Rica outside on several occasions, dressed in inadequate clothing in the cold weather, her face bearing visible bruises. She described Baker's demeanor as aggressive and intimidating, while Richard Rountree seemed withdrawn and fearful. Another witness, a teacher at Rica's school, testified to noticing changes in Rica's behavior in the months leading up to her death. She described Rica as becoming increasingly withdrawn and anxious, her grades declining sharply. She recalled Rica confiding in her about being scared of Baker and expressing a desire to return to her mother. The prosecution argued that Baker's actions were not merely a case of discipline gone too far, but a deliberate and systematic pattern of abuse designed to inflict pain and exert control over Rica. They emphasized the escalating nature of the abuse, culminating in Rica's tragic death. The defense, led by attorney Todd Ringel, attempted to paint a different picture of Baker. They argued that she was a loving and caring caregiver who had been overwhelmed by the challenges of raising a difficult child. They claimed that the videos were taken out of context and did not represent the full picture of Baker's relationship with Rica. The defense called witnesses who testified to Baker's good character, describing her as a kind and compassionate person. They presented evidence of Baker's involvement in church activities and her volunteer work with children. They argued that the physical punishments inflicted on Rica were within the bounds of reasonable discipline and that Baker had never intended to cause her serious harm. However, the defense's arguments were ultimately undermined by the overwhelming weight of the evidence against Baker. The jury, visibly shaken by the testimony and the graphic videos, deliberated for less than 2 hours before reaching a verdict. Cynthia Baker was found guilty of first-degree murder, aggravated battery of a child, endangering the life of a child, and multiple counts of domestic battery. The verdict was a resounding victory for the prosecution and a testament to the strength of the evidence against Baker, but it also raised troubling questions about the role of the system in Rica's death. How did the abuse go undetected for so long? Why weren't the warning signs heeded? And what will be the consequences for Richard Rountree, Rica's father, who was also implicated in the abuse? Stay with us as we continue to explore the case of Rica Rountree and seek justice for a life cut tragically short. While Cynthia Baker's conviction brought a sense of justice for Rica, it was clear that she wasn't the only one responsible for the young girl's tragic death. Richard Rountree, Rica's own father, the man who should have been her protector, was also deeply implicated in the horrific abuse she suffered. Richard Rountree's involvement went beyond simply allowing the abuse to occur. Evidence presented during Baker's trial revealed that he actively participated in the physical and emotional torment of his daughter. He was not merely a passive bystander but an active contributor to Rica's suffering. Text messages between Rountree and Baker revealed a disturbing pattern of communication. They discussed Rica in derogatory terms, complaining about her behavior and expressing frustration with her. They joked about the punishments they inflicted upon her, their words devoid of any empathy or compassion. But the most damning evidence against Rountree came in the form of videos he himself had recorded. These videos, discovered on his cell phone, showed him actively participating in the abuse. In one video, he can be seen forcing Rica to stand on her head for an extended period, her face red and contorted with effort. In another, he is heard yelling at Rica, berating her for a minor infraction. These videos shattered any notion that Rountree was merely a victim of Baker's manipulation. They revealed him to be an abuser in his own right, a man who had betrayed the most fundamental trust a child can have in a parent. Rica Rountree's involvement in Rica's abuse raises troubling questions about the nature of complicity and the responsibility of caregivers. Was he truly under Baker's control, or did he willingly participate in the abuse? Did he ever try to protect Rica, or did he simply prioritize his own needs above hers? And what will be the consequences for his actions? Stay with us as we continue to explore the complexities of this case and seek justice for Rica Rountree. The wheels of justice turned slowly, but they did turn. In November 2019, Cynthia Baker was found guilty of first-degree murder, aggravated battery of a child, endangering the life of a child, and multiple counts of domestic battery. She was sentenced to natural life in prison without the possibility of parole, a sentence that reflected the severity of her crimes and the profound impact they had on Rica's life. Rica Rountree, initially spared from charges, was eventually arrested and charged with child endangerment. He pleaded guilty to the charges and, in February 2020, was sentenced to 8 years in prison. While his sentence was significantly shorter than Baker's, it marked a degree of accountability for his role in Rica's abuse and death. But the question remains, was this justice for Rica? Can any sentence truly compensate for the loss of a young life, for the pain and suffering she endured? Can the legal system ever truly address the complex factors that contribute to child abuse and neglect? Rica's case highlights the limitations of the justice system in addressing systemic issues. While the convictions of Baker and Rountree brought a sense of closure, they did not erase the underlying problems that allowed the abuse to occur in the first place. The failures of child protective services, the lack of support for struggling families, and the societal indifference to the plight of vulnerable children, these are the issues that continue to plague our communities and put countless children at risk. Rica's story is a reminder that justice is not just about punishment. It's about prevention, about creating a society where all children are safe, nurtured, and protected. It's about holding individuals accountable for their actions, but also about addressing the root causes of child abuse and neglect. So, while we acknowledge the legal outcomes in Rica's case, we must also ask ourselves what more can be done. How can we prevent another tragedy like this from happening again? And how can we ensure that all children have the chance to live a life free from fear and violence? Rica Rountree's life was tragically cut short, but her story continues to resonate. It's a story of resilience and hope, but also of heartbreak and loss. It's a story that challenges us to confront uncomfortable truths about our society and to work towards a future where all children are safe and protected. Rica's legacy lives on in the hearts of those who loved her, and in the ongoing fight to prevent child abuse and neglect. Her story is a reminder that every child deserves a chance to thrive, to reach their full potential, and to live a life free from harm. In the next scene, we'll hear from Anntionetta Rountree, Rica's mother, as she shares her memories of her daughter and her tireless fight for justice. Her story is a testament to the enduring power of a mother's love and the unwavering determination to protect children from harm. Anntionetta Rountree, Rica's mother, has been a tireless advocate for justice in the wake of her daughter's tragic death. Despite her own struggles and the immense grief she has endured, she has channeled her energy into ensuring that Rica's story is heard, and that those responsible are held accountable. She has become a voice for the voiceless, a champion for children who are at risk of abuse and neglect. Antionetta's journey has been one of profound heartbreak and unwavering determination. She has spoken out publicly about her experiences, sharing her story with news outlets, community organizations, and anyone who will listen. She has organized rallies and protests, demanding justice for Rica and calling for systemic changes to protect children. Antionetta's fight began long before Rica's death. During the contentious custody battle with Rica Rountree, she repeatedly raised concerns about his ability to provide a safe and stable environment for her children. She documented instances of domestic violence and expressed her fears about Cynthia Baker's influence on Richard. But her pleas were largely ignored, her warnings dismissed. After Rica's death, Antionetta's grief was compounded by a sense of injustice. She felt that the system had failed her daughter, that the warning signs had been overlooked, and that opportunities to intervene had been missed. She resolved to do everything in her power to prevent other children from suffering the same fate. Anntionetta has become a vocal critic of the Department of Children and Family Services, DEFS, in Illinois. She has accused the agency of negligence and incompetence, claiming that they failed to adequately investigate her concerns and protect Rica from harm. She has called for greater accountability within DECs and for reforms to ensure that children's safety is prioritized. Anntionetta has also been active in supporting legislation aimed at strengthening child protection laws. She has testified before lawmakers, sharing her story and advocating for stricter penalties for child abusers and greater support for families in crisis. She has worked with organizations like the Justice for Rica J Foundation to raise awareness about child abuse and to provide resources to families in need. Antionetta's fight is not just about seeking justice for Rica. It's about creating a world where all children are safe, nurtured, and protected. It's about empowering parents to speak up for their children and holding systems accountable for their failures. It's about ensuring that no other child suffers the same tragic fate as Rica Rountree. But Antionetta's fight is far from over. She continues to face challenges and setbacks, but she remains undeterred. She is a beacon of hope for those who have lost loved ones to violence, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can endure and find the strength to fight for change. In the next scene, we'll examine the systemic failures that contributed to Rica's death and explore the broader issue of child abuse and neglect in our society. We'll ask the difficult questions about what went wrong and what can be done to prevent future tragedies. Rica Rountree's tragic death exposed deep flaws in the very systems designed to protect children from harm. Her case serves as a stark reminder that even in seemingly ordinary communities, vulnerable children can slip through the cracks, becoming victims of abuse and neglect, while those meant to safeguard them fail to act. One of the most glaring failures in Rica's case was the inadequacy of the child welfare system. The Department of Children and Family Services, DAFS, received multiple reports concerning Rica's well-being, yet failed to take decisive action to protect her. Reports from school officials, neighbors, and even family members raised red flags about the situation in the Rountree household, but these warnings were seemingly ignored or dismissed. Investigations by DECs were often cursory and incomplete. Caseworkers failed to conduct thorough home visits, to interview Rica privately, or to adequately assess the risk posed by Rica Rountree and Cynthia Baker. The agency seemed overwhelmed and understaffed, struggling to keep up with the high volume of cases and failing to prioritize those that pose the greatest danger to children. The court system also bears some responsibility for Rica's death. Despite Anntionetta Rountree's repeated pleas and documented evidence of Rica Rountree's history of domestic violence, the court ultimately granted him custody of Rica and her brother. This decision, made without a full understanding of the risks involved, placed Rica directly in harm's way. The failures in Rica's case are not isolated incidents. They reflect systemic problems within child welfare agencies and the court system, problems that persist across the country. These problems include lack of resources. Child welfare agencies are often chronically underfunded and understaffed, making it difficult for caseworkers to adequately investigate reports and provide necessary support to families. High caseloads. Caseworkers often juggle an overwhelming number of cases, leading to burnout and a decreased ability to provide individualized attention to each child. Lack of training. Caseworkers may lack the training and expertise to recognize and address complex issues such as domestic violence, substance abuse, and mental health problems, which can contribute to child abuse and neglect. Bias and discrimination. Systemic biases within the child welfare system can disadvantage certain families, particularly those who are low income, people of color, or have disabilities. Lack of coordination. Communication breakdowns between child welfare agencies, law enforcement, and the courts can hinder effective intervention and put children at further risk. These systemic failures have devastating consequences for children. Every year, thousands of children suffer abuse and neglect, and many die as a result. Rica's case is a tragic reminder that we must do better. We must demand greater accountability from our child welfare agencies and the court system. We must invest in resources and training to support families and protect children. And we must work to create a society where all children are valued, nurtured, and protected from harm. In the next scene, we'll shift our focus to the community's role in preventing child abuse and neglect. We'll explore how we can all become more vigilant and proactive in protecting the children in our lives and our communities. While the failures of child protective services and the court system played a significant role in Rica Rountree's tragic death, it's crucial to recognize that the responsibility for protecting children extends far beyond these institutions. We, as a community, have a collective obligation to safeguard the well-being of our most vulnerable members. Rica's case is a stark reminder that child abuse and neglect can occur anywhere, in any neighborhood, within any family. It's a pervasive problem that demands a collective response. We cannot afford to be complacent, to assume that someone else will take action, to turn a blind eye to the signs of abuse. We need to be vigilant, to be aware of the children in our lives and our communities. We need to recognize the signs of abuse and neglect, to be willing to ask questions, and to take action when we suspect that a child is in danger. Silence is not an option when a child's life is at stake. What are the signs of child abuse and neglect? They can be physical, emotional, or behavioral. Physical signs might include unexplained bruises, burns, or fractures. Emotional signs might include withdrawal, anxiety, or depression. Behavioral signs might include aggression, self-harm, or changes in eating or sleeping patterns. If you suspect that a child is being abused or neglected, it's crucial to report your concerns to the appropriate authorities. You can contact your local Child Protective Services agency or law enforcement. You can also reach out to national hotlines such as the Childhelp USA National Child Abuse Hotline at 180-042-244-53. But our responsibility goes beyond simply reporting suspected abuse. We need to create a culture of support for children and families. We need to provide resources and services to families in crisis to help them address the underlying issues that can contribute to abuse and neglect. We need to foster strong communities where children feel safe, valued, and protected. This means investing in early childhood education, providing access to mental health services, and supporting programs that strengthen families. It means creating safe spaces for children to play and learn, and fostering positive relationships between children and adults. Protecting children is not just the responsibility of parents, teachers, or social workers. It's the responsibility of all of us. We all have a role to play in creating a world where every child has the opportunity to thrive and reach their full potential. In the next scene, we'll remember Rica Rountree, the little girl whose life was tragically cut short. We'll celebrate her spirit, honor her memory, and reaffirm our commitment to protecting all children from harm. As we reach the end of this documentary, it's important to remember Rica Rountree, not just as a victim of abuse, but as the bright, loving child she was. Let us shift our focus from the darkness that consumed her final days and celebrate the light that shone within her during her short time on this earth. Rica was a little girl who loved to sing and dance. She had a contagious laugh and a smile that could light up a room. She was kind and compassionate, always ready with a hug or a helping hand. She loved animals and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian one day. She was a beloved daughter, sister, and friend. She brought joy to those around her, and her absence is deeply felt by all who knew her. Though her life was tragically cut short, her memory lives on in the hearts of those who loved her. Let us remember Rica's infectious laughter, her bright smile, her kind heart. Let us remember her love for animals, her passion for learning, her dreams for the future. Let us remember her as the beautiful, vibrant child she was, full of life and potential. Rica's story is a reminder that every child is precious, that every life is valuable. It's a call to action, a plea to protect our children, and to create a world where they can thrive. Though Rica is no longer with us, her spirit lives on. It lives on in the memories of those who loved her, in the fight for justice that continues in her name, and in the hope that her story will inspire others to take action to protect children from harm. In the final scene, we'll offer a call to action, urging viewers to get involved in the fight against child abuse and neglect. We'll provide resources and information on how to make a difference in the lives of children in our communities. Rica Rountree's story is a tragic one, but it's also a story of hope. It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in preventing child abuse and neglect. We can't afford to be bystanders. We must be vigilant, proactive, and willing to speak up for those who can't speak for themselves. If you suspect that a child is being abused or neglected, please don't hesitate to take action. You can contact your local Child Protective Services agency or law enforcement. You can also reach out to national hotlines such as the Childhelp USA National Child Abuse Hotline at 180-042-244-53. But our responsibility goes beyond simply reporting suspected abuse. We need to create a culture of support for children and families. We need to invest in programs that strengthen families, provide resources to those in crisis, and promote positive parenting practices. We need to educate ourselves about the signs of child abuse and neglect, and we need to be willing to have difficult conversations with friends, family members, and neighbors about this important issue. We need to challenge societal norms that condone violence against children and create safe spaces where children feel valued and protected. Rica's legacy lives on in the fight to protect children from harm. Her story has inspired countless individuals to take action, to speak out, and to demand change. It has sparked a national conversation about child abuse and neglect, and it has led to concrete reforms in child welfare systems across the country. Rica's story reminds us that every child deserves a chance to live a life free from fear and violence. It's a call to action, a plea to create a world where all children are safe, nurtured, and empowered to reach their full potential. Thank you for watching this documentary. We hope that it has inspired you to get involved in the fight against child abuse and neglect. Together we can make a difference in the lives of children and create a brighter future for all. If you found this documentary informative and impactful, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more content like this. Share this video with your friends and family to help raise awareness about this important issue. And most importantly, take action to protect the children in your life and your community. Rica Rountree's life may have been tragically cut short, but her story will continue to inspire us to fight for a world where all children are safe and loved. Let us honor her memory by working together to create a brighter future for all children.